started. We have some people that need to leave a little bit early, so calling the local contract review board meeting. So quick roll call.
Councilor Riley.
Megan Perkins, she, her.
Mike Riley, he, him.
All right. So next, we'll go ahead and move to the approval of the January 8th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Move to approve the January 8th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Second.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and jump in with our first agenda item. So today we've got the guaranteed maximum price GMP3 for Public Works Campus. And then followed by that, we will be going over equity and procurement program updates regarding supplier diversity and community benefits. And then along with that, we'll be going over some proposed City of Bend municipal code updates. So kind of a packed agenda today. No, did you need to get into? It's not a team meeting, it's a Zoom. Sorry. Oh, we practiced me, not you, huh?
Right. I was like, oh.
The Zoom link was in the attachment of what I provided in the email earlier, so I should have that. Everyone excited for good weather tomorrow?
Yeah.
The one day before it starts.
I know. It's like
No, on
a
Thursday, right?
It's
Sprinter.
sprinter, yes.
I think it's appropriate actually for April
Yeah.
Fool's Day. It's like happy spring.
Yeah. Yeah. Turn on those sprinklers if we're gonna laugh at you, Hunter.
You have the link? Okay. It's a presentation.
Hey, let's go.
I know they just kind of filtered out for you. Yeah.
This week off, just went to a show.
Okay.
All right, so I am presenting Public Works Campus. Going to run through
What are we doing up there?
It's a little project.
I was gonna show you in just a moment.
Project up north.
Project.
Yeah.
So topics to be covered at council meeting today are just going through the background and updates on the Public Works Campus. I'm going to focus a little bit on the project scope. You've all heard this before, but I'm going to go a little deeper into some of the sustainability and community benefits aspects of the project, just to bring you up to speed on some of where we're at with that. And then the request for the GMP. So project background. As you know, back in 2015 and then again in 18, we did early studies that really defined what the project needed to be and why we needed to do this project overall. Then in 21, you all hired myself and we started moving forward to really plan the campus and define the site for the campus. We are working to, the mission of the project is maximize the efficiencies and to combine the similar functions of EIPD, facilities, fleet, TMD, and utilities, with the goal to not only do those, but also meet our public obligations for 1.5% for green technology and 1% for ERT. Previous council decisions, there have been many to date now related to the project. So namely, approving the site in 21, signing and approving the contract for the owner's representative, which we then authorized the completion of their contract allocation last year, and then the contract with Kirby Nagelhout as the design builder of the project. We came back to council in December 7th, June 21st, and then again on September 6th to take the next steps on those contracts. And then on September 6th is when you approved the ODOE grant move forward. And then we came back on the September 20th to authorize the next GMP related to getting construction moving further. And then art and public places and some other miscellaneous contracts have gone forward since then. So project scope. And Heather, do you want me to go through the whole presentation as I would in a typical council meeting, or should we kind of just go quick so we can get to the?
I think just
Sorry.
sketch it out. It's
Okay.
fine. You don't need to give it verbatim as you would a council, but just to,
And then,
Like,
yeah, if there's any
I've only done
questions. then you have
CRB a
that.
couple of times, so sorry. So project scope, we still have the 3 primary buildings, or vehicle storage, the headquarters and water laboratory, and then the fleet maintenance. And then there's a number of kind of smaller structures that support the work that everybody does. So where I want to go a little bit deeper is around the sustainability end. I know that's in alignment with a lot of council's other goals. So the direction for the project was to track for LEED certification. We're actually tracking for LEED Gold just by aligning our climate action plan and our sustainable energy management plan. We were pretty much at gold already. So that is where we're tracking. We also are enrolled in the Energy Trust of Oregon's Path to Net Zero program. So far, we've received the initial $15,000 to support the design charrette that was done early on. And we're estimating over $500,000 of additional incentive that will be based on the type of equipment and other aspects that we're doing with the project. And then we did apply for the ODOE grant and received the $100,000 design grant. We are working shortly. The announcement, I think, just came out today for the next round of construction grants from ODOE, and we plan to apply for that, and that will be up to $10 million to actually be able to build the battery backup that we designed with $100,000. So hopefully we'll get that. Some of the aspects of sustainability, we really focused on low carbon. So the primary structures are mass timber and glulam construction, which is using, rapidly renewable wood products instead of carbon heavy products. We're focusing a lot on our concrete mixes to make sure that they are a lower carbon emitting type of mix. And then we are an all electric campus. And so we have no natural gas coming to the site. The only gas planned to be on site is our backup diesel generator and some propane tank that is needed to run some of our equipment, but nothing to run the campus. And then we're doing a lot with natural daylight, really reduce the amount of electrical light that we need during the daylight hours. And then EV charging initially for 20 spaces on site. 6 will be in the public and employee parking space. 14 will be in the city's fleet area. And then we have infrastructure going in for future EV. Then we did a lot of preserving natural landscape.
Is the infrastructure just like the conduit? That's what it's.
Yeah, so just
it's like
basic conduit
ready.
ready to be
Charging.
stepped up into charging stations. And then the backbone to be able to put in the additional electrical panels as we do that. So going back to our ETO, so I mentioned the incentives. The Path to Net Zero program requires that we hit a certain percentage. So it's a path to net zero program. It's not actually necessarily meeting net zero. And So based on that, we would need 200 KWs of solar to actually meet that requirement. We are planning to install about 600 kilowatts of solar based on our 1.5% green technology allocation. So we're going to actually be 400 kilowatts better than what the Path to Net Zero program requires to meet that. And we're only about 10 kilowatts off of receiving what we call net zero. So our calculated kind of energy for the campus is going to be almost completely provided by our solar panels on day one. If we can nudge it up through some of the grants that we're doing, we have a potential to get all the way to net positive. Net positive means that you not only meet what your kind of calculated 610 kilowatts is, but up to kind of that's that kind of differential of surplus, right? Just to handle those kind of peak power potentials. So we're doing that standpoint.
Yeah.
Community benefits wise, this is one of the first construction projects the city did where we put community benefits to our solicitation request and are tracking how we're doing in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion on the subcontracts and subconsultant procurements that we are doing underneath our contract with Kirby Natal Health. We have had a couple of significant wins, I would say, in terms of moving that forward. So as a project, we put a goal of 5%. The city didn't give us a specific goal, but we just said internally, we're going to try to hit 5% of the total subcontracts that go to COVID certified firms. And we are currently at approximately 750,000 of our design fee has been awarded to equity firms. We're at about $500,000 so far to equity subcontractors of what we've already contracted out under GMP 1 and 2. And we're estimating about 3.1 million more of our GMP 3 and dollars to date that we expect to expend towards equity firms. A couple of great highlights. Our trade partner, due to the procurement plan that council authorized back in June last year, we're able to award larger contracts to firms that are either certified or are committed to become certified through the course of the project. And by doing that, Taylor Northwest was able to directly award to a couple of equity firms or equity subcontractors, Triple T and Grizzly Mountain. Additionally, we have 2 contractors that we have contracted with the expectation that they would apply for and seek certification by taking our contracts. And Southtown Glass and JNS have already received their certification due to our kind of encouraging and supporting them. So pretty something I'm proud of.
Yes.
We're moving the needle. What's that?
Just ownership, or are they based off on like the makeup of the workforce of the companies?
That is based so COVID certification is just based on the ownership of the company. So those are companies that are either minority or women owned or emerging small businesses. And that's kind of how we're calculating it right now. I think as we move forward with developing our program further, and I've been talking with Heather and with Andres, we definitely have a possibility of tracking who's actually employed within firms as kind of the next level. But we're not doing that on this project. We did come before council previously on public art on campus. We are moving forward with those calls through the contract with AIPP. The first call has been completed and 2 artists have been shortlisted as finalists, and the second call is about to go out on that. Schedule wise, we are still tracking to our original schedule goal. This is the last significant contract that we expect to come before all of you for approval. And this will get us through construction completion at the end of 25, as well as all of our moves and post occupancy period, which takes us up to the end of 26. And that, the moves by the end of 25 will get us out of Boyd Acres in time to not have to pay the additional cost for the Boyd Acres property.
Sorry, could you say that last part again?
So we have a purchase agreement.
We have a contract to sell the Boyd Acres site to the Parks District, and that transfer occurs at the end of 2025. So we're hoping to be out of the Boyd Acres site, so that we don't have to lease back from the Parks District after we sell it to them.
And so we are on track to
You
do
do have
that.
that option.
We have them
We have the option, and the ability to lease back if we're not moved out on time. We hope to avoid that. That sounds like we're on schedule.
For the move, so the difference between 119 million, 124,000 and the previous estimated total contract or total project cost of 130 million is the moves and vacation. Is that cost included in this contract, or is that going to be additional?
Those costs are included within this contract. They are contracted to do the physical move and essentially do the room, leave them fairly clean. Facilities will be removing the furniture and things like that. So that cost is in the 119.
Okay.
The 11 million, roughly 10 point, is the balance that is in the owner's responsibility to pay. So those going to the other contracts that you have approved, paying permits,
STCs.
SCCs, various
furniture.
costs like that. Yeah, the furniture. Yeah, that's one of the other.
And
So,
that's the remaining 10 million or so, or 11 million.
right. So if you look right behind you. So we have currently, we awarded 3 million to OTAC and 40.5 roughly to KNCC. We have about $500,000 of other miscellaneous contracts that have already been awarded. So that's for things like special inspections, the design portion of the furniture, or archaeologists, smaller contracts like that have already gone forward. And then what is still kind of to be awarded is embedded within that $6.5 million on the bottom here. But that also has all of our other owner side miscellaneous costs like SDCs and permits.
Does that include costs of vacating the Boyd Acres site?
It does not, facilities is taking on the responsibility of essentially taking out anything left behind that they're not bringing to the new site.
Okay.
So they're getting rid of the furniture, moving it to our other locations. But everything else is included in this.
And then last question, you mentioned in the memo, savings and overall construction costs are anticipated as a result of the progressive design build process. Is there anything that we can share
Point
about
to.
those savings, or?
I think probably the most poignant is their early estimate was 140. And we were able to achieve a 130 target with a better, I would say we're getting more scope, more quality than we would have gotten if we went, but there's not really a good way to be like, oh, this happened because of that
That's
contract.
this dollars is that.
Yeah, it's really like that statement really comes from the history of tracking progressive design build approaches compared to other approaches and the kind of standard cost per square foot for, if you go design bid build, for a similar project, the outcome would typically be higher.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's where we're at in terms of expenditures. Funding is pretty much exactly what you saw before. I did add the grants and incentives now that we have some dollars assigned to that. That will be incorporated into some of the cost offsets. So what we're presenting to you, as I mentioned, would be the completion of the remaining phases of the KNCC contract. So the rest of construction that we haven't already awarded them all the way through the end of 2026, which covers our post occupancy and warranty period. other than that, the only things I expect come back to council for, we will be awarding at least three contracts related to 1% for art. And for the AIPP contract, we will be contracting directly with those artists. So those will likely come back to you for approval. And then, we only have authorized so far the contract for, the design portion of Sector Bureau. And I think that comes back to council, even though the master.
I'm not sure on that
Should have
one.
checked that ahead of
Yeah.
time. So we'll have to execute the actual furniture order once we're done with design. So that is the end.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, or this is an opportunity to also help shape, if there's some things that you think are missing as part of the presentation or need to be emphasized or.
Well, do you want to talk
Questions
about
or
that
issues,
savings
summary?
issue a little bit more? I mean, it's roughly 10 million out of 140. I mean, that's what we're projecting at this point. I don't know if it's gonna dig a hole that's hard to get out of if it doesn't occur for some reason at this point, so maybe we talk about it later.
Well, I
Yeah,
think that,
go
that point will also come up. So when we do an alternative contracting process like progressive design build, first findings have to come to you to approve something other than design it, then bid it and build it. One of the requirements to get into an alternate contracting method is that using a different method will result in cost savings to the city. So that's where what Joe was talking about, that comes from. Overall, what do we think the benefit of progressive design build will be? When we complete a project done under an alternative contracting method, we also have to come back with a report that says, how did we do? We thought we were going to save money. How did we do? And so you see those, we usually put them on the consent agenda, but for every contract we do, every project that's alternatively contracted for, there's a report at the end that compares and looks back. We thought we had findings that we thought we were going to save money. We thought we were going to achieve these efficiencies and get a better outcome. How did we do? So we will have that report. Again, typically they're on the consent agenda, but that's where we do sort of a deep, I mean, these are like 15, 20-page reports really about how we did in delivering the project based on what we thought we would do, including the cost savings.
Yeah,
We could sort of, I think, maybe talk about it at a high level.
Right.
Here, and then just say, we'll come back with the full report, but it's usually not till the project's done.
Well, it's within
Yeah,
30 days after the project ends, so
Yeah.
2027.
Yeah. That'd be satisfying to this.
Yeah.
council, but-
But I think it's pretty remarkable, given the length and scope of this project, that we are still achieving these cost savings, especially when we know about
Yeah.
inflation and everything else. So I think it's worth
Mhm.
highlighting.
just being sure that it's projected. We'll know.
Yeah, I mean, we are, yeah. I am
I mean,
committed
the
to keeping
surprise
it to
stuff
130.
is, usually when you're going underground and we're mostly through stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, there could be some things that,
Once the site work's done, we did a tour on it, so.
yeah.
Where, if you go back like one or two slides, sorry, forward one, the next one. So those contracts, are they accounted for? The
In
dollar
that
values
6.5, yeah,
In that 6.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
absolutely.
Joe, did
Yeah.
you want to mention the 1% for Eric as well?
Yes, so in the issue summary, you'll notice part of the authorization, similar to what you have approved with other significant projects, is we are allocating to Eric 1% of the construction costs as authority for change orders, because this is, the dollar amount of this project is so much higher. And from talking with you, it's typically been in the kind of 1 to 10%. We went with one because it is such a big number that there's still some controls there.
So that, if we didn't have that, that would make this list of upcoming council requests much larger if we had to bring every contract change over 100,000 back. So just highlighting that it's a bigger number than we've seen before, but it's within the range of consistent with prior
The
contracts.
total, the dollar equivalent of 1%. is
Yes.
bigger.
Yeah,
It
because
still
the
doesn't
project.
seem like it's that big a number.
No.
given the scope of the Project.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
It's another nice feature of the progressive design bill. It's like you're having much better conversations with the contractor on where you're at, where the risks are. A lot of it getting mitigated for, like, in terms of the GMP. This is the big number that we were waiting for.
So that number feels like it's the right number, though. It doesn't need to be any bigger.
No,
1.5%.
So is it 1% of the total
Of the
contract?
79, right?
It's only 1% of the
construction amount,
The con-
correct.
contract.
So it's not the total amount. Construction is,
It's not for the relocation and vacating and just for the construction.
correct.
Of the construction portion of the 79 million.
Well, I think we're gonna refine that.
We'll
to an
refine that to an
dollar
actual
number
dollar amount.
rather than a percentage
Yeah.
when somebody's reading the motion. It's easier to track and I think it'll be more transparent when we've hit that number or not, if we say the actual
We
number.
don't have to break down in the summary of the amount.
No, I don't have that broken down in the summary. But as Elizabeth said, we both have it broken down. We're still doing some tweaks and finalizing the exact number we're going to come to council, but it should be within the realm of what we've.
It'll be about 1%.
And
I mean, I think other than adding in the savings, the focus on the sustainability,
Mhm.
community benefit, the equity contract, I think that's really important for everyone to hear.
Do you have a sense from that? Sorry.
No, I'm done.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think that is something that when we do the final report, I want to make sure that we also emphasize part of the alternative contracting allowed us to really get creative, come to council for approval of a different type of procurement method to be able to really push some of those goals that we have to be able to allow for, you know, how the contractor is subcontracting out in order to encourage with that extra time, also because the contractor was on board so early. I mean, we had COVID come out here and do a presentation
You
with
would explain what COVID is.
a COVID is, it's in the presentation, I always forget. But it's the Oregon,
Heather, you probably have that.
business.
I do have it on mine.
Yeah.
It's CO
We have it spelled out.
Certified office.
That's
of
right.
equity. No,
There's a B in there.
Business.
oh my gosh, it is.
This is why I always say, because I never have.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's COVID, not COVID.
Correct. COVID. But-
Sorry.
Oregon Department of Energy's community renew, nope.
So it's Certification Office for Business Inclusion and
There you go.
Diversity.
Good
That's Google.
She's a lawyer.
job, good job. I'm like, I have it somewhere in their presentation. Yeah, so. Yeah, we were able to partner with them to get the word out to subcontractors way ahead of us actually issuing, bid packages. And so people were thinking about it, people started applying ahead of time. We are in a region that we haven't had agencies really request for people to be certified. And so and we're finding more folks that are already in Central Oregon, but have never been incentivized or needed to apply for that certification. And it is a process and it is something you have to do annual reporting. And so we need to give them the reason to do that if we're going to have those type of programs. But the alternative contracting, I think, allowed us to do those, get ahead of those kinds of things. You were going to say something.
Well, that relative to the goal of 5% that you had for the minority and then emerging small businesses. Where are you expecting to be relative to that goal? Do you think you're going to be at it or just below it or above it? I mean, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah.
Or does that feel?
I think I can definitely talk about it.
Get those two little bars.
You had the
I
board
have the
but-
bar and I didn't really talk about that.
Yeah, what the projections are.
Yeah,
We talked
so,
about that with energy,
you know,
we talked about that with some other things. but-
Right. So design wise, we have exceeded our goal just barely. We're at, I think, 5.4% has been awarded. Construction has been a bigger lift, but we're also, right now, we're in the early construction phases, which have fewer certified firms typically on most construction projects. There's the kind of work we've been doing requires a lot of big equipment, requires a lot of. There's just not that many equity small businesses that are typically doing this kind of work, even when you're in a region like Portland that has much higher certified number of the contractors. And so always on projects, you see the last 10 to 20% of the construction is where your equity numbers jump. Because there tends to be a lot of folks that are doing carpentry, that are doing, finish work, that are doing a lot of that work that happens towards the end of the project. So it's not a, it's not a trajectory like this. It's kind of goes like, it's kind of a reverse bell curve. I think we're going to either hit our goal or be very close to it. It is a slightly aggressive goal for this region because of where we started. So we're doing pretty well.
I mean, the teams have good conversations, right? The contractors are open to their concepts. They're trying to figure it out. It's more of just true availability in the region.
And, every time I sign one of the bid awards, we have, so when we authorize bids, I get to see, who actually bid on the project. There's a line for were they a certified firm or not. And if it's not the certified firm that's being awarded the project, we have a conversation and say why. What was it? Was there a barrier that they had that they couldn't overcome? Or what, trying to kind of dig into it. And then sometimes we've been successful that the contractor awarded the contract agrees to bring on the minority contractor as a sub to them. And so those things are happening because of the transparency that we have and the process that we're having to kind of vet every single person that comes through. So that helps. We've had that in a few instances where the small business wasn't able to take on the entire award, but they were able to do a piece of it. So that's the Taylor Northwest example was, the earthwork company couldn't take on the whole thing. They don't have the right equipment even. Taylor Northwest actually brought them in under them as a subcontractor, awarded them and helped them find the right equipment to rent to be able to do this bigger earthwork. They had never done earthwork this big before. So that's a great story.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's probably not when you're doing the presentation, it's probably not the time to talk about that, but there's so many things that were piloted.
Right.
That tried this time around. And I think there's some great lessons that we learned from this that we can be using in the future.
Absolutely.
Worth a future conversation.
And we don't want to wait until that report comes out in 27.
Exactly.
So we're having those conversations now, like Heather and Andreas are pulling me into conversations and saying, we're sharing information as we're developing.
Which is a good segue.
Yeah.
Are we all done with me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's good.
Thanks, Joe.
Let's see if there's any good furniture at Boyd Acres you guys can get.
If you're a big
Yeah.
fan of circa 70s, 80s.
Regulars.
I don't know if it makes mid-century modern yet or not.
Yeah, probably not.
Oh, wow.
It's all coming back.
Big, heavy desks.
Yes, that is a great segue to
Yeah.
our next item. So equity and procurement. So we'll be switching gears a little bit to talk about our work on supplier diversity and our community benefits program. So today our goal is to receive guidance and direction from you, Mayor Pro Tem Perkins, and Councilors Mendez and Riley. The three things we'll be going over is an overview of supplier diversity. Sorry about that. An overview of supplier diversity and community benefit based on our research to date. And then we'll also go over some of the staff pilot proposals that we are recommending. And then we'll also propose a draft code language that supports the city's commitment to supplier diversity and community benefit. So supplier diversity and community benefits is part of the fiscal year 23-25 city council goals. And the strategy is to advance the city's commitment to equity, and the action is to develop and implement supplier diversity and community benefit programs. And so I've created this presentation to be a little bit high level so that community members can also understand what we're working on. So I'd like you to refer to the handout that I provided. This was original slide, and as you can see, not everybody had that, but but as originally it was this one right here. Yep. This one right here. Yep. Originally that was a slide, and wow, that would have been just really overwhelming to go over. So we kind of pulled that back a little bit. But this is a slide to get us all on the same page of the difference between the two programs. At kind of a high level. And then the next few slides I'll go over will give more detail for each project. So to the left of the handout, on the handout at the top, is information about the supplier diversity program. So what are we trying to accomplish? We're really trying to incorporate diverse owned businesses, suppliers, and vendors into the city's supply chain and business practices. So who is the community audience? Well, there are members of ethnic minorities, women-owned, veteran-owned, small emerging businesses, LGBTQ+, and individuals with disabilities. Our pilot program for this is going to be focusing mostly on materials, goods, and services. So on the right side of your handout has some information about the community benefit program. So what are we trying to accomplish there? We want to utilize the city's purchasing power to increase wages, insurance, and environmental considerations, and also apprenticeship programs with our public improvement contracts. We're looking to expand economic opportunity to benefit the community. Projects would consist of construction, reconstruction, and on major renovation on real property. So who's the community audience for this? Community benefits can help ensure that measurable local benefits will be given to our community. The pilot that we're looking for this is the pilot approach taking on this are kind of focused around all our alternative construction projects. For example, we talked about Joe talked about the Public Works project. That one's kind of a really good goal, but in trying to make sure that we're having achievable goals around that, we're looking at something similar to the Wilson project, where we took into consideration in the scoring the community benefit aspect. But we'd also like to take that information that we're asking for and when we have proposals turned in to see where the construction community is in terms of meeting our future requirements. And I'll be going over that a little bit more detail in future slides. For our next steps, and this is actually applicable to both projects, we're looking to change, or we're proposing to change a code change to the city's procurement code. We will implement programs to pilot the projects, have measurable KPIs, looking to provide outreach. That would be outreach and engagement internally to the city staff and stakeholders, and then externally with community members. And then finally, we'd like to take that information and learn from our pilots and figure out from the collected data to learn, continue, build, and then scale the program for improvements and refinement. So switching gears just to specifically address supplier diversity, why are we doing this work and why is it important? So supplier diversity is important for several reasons. It promotes inclusivity and equal opportunities for underrepresented groups. We're trying to advance economic equity to foster economic empowerment and then growth within marginalized communities in our local community. And then we really want to cultivate sustainable partnerships with our suppliers. And then finally, we'd like to widen the pool of our suppliers to be able to promote competition. So the city has some flexibility in how we require certification as diverse suppliers. So that's the bottom piece of your handout. Diverse suppliers can be third-party certified or self-identified certified. And the handout I provided has several examples of third-party certification, one of which is the state of Oregon's certification through Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity, or COVID. Third-party certification really is preferred. However, in doing our research and talking to many other local municipalities within Oregon, it is a little bit difficult to achieve that the certification. So we talked with City of Hillsborough, Metro, and Lane County, and they've noted that third-party certification, specifically COVID, has created some barriers to entry for many of the diverse suppliers, which led them to allow for self-certification within their programs.
The COVID state program has created barriers.
It has. It's, as Joe was mentioning, you have to apply every year, and there's many requirements around the application.
And there's their time to even.
Yeah, thank you.
Says is how long to take, you told me this.
It's like, it's
Years.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
it can take, your initial application can take a year, but renewing it is a lot of time each year to do that too. So it's something that I think that it's a worthwhile effort to achieve that, but it's something that we have thought about maybe not necessarily doing within our program to start with.
Yeah.
We need to give the state some time to maybe refine that process before we make that a requirement.
One of the other things that came up in the core area advisory board when they were doing their development assistance program guidelines, a business owner on that committee said, to qualify for some of these things, the woman, for example, would have to be 51% of an ownership. But if you're in an equal partnership, someone who's a minority and someone who's not, or a man and a woman, then you don't qualify. But it's 50-50. And so there's a consideration of, do we want some other standards locally to count for our program?
And so, sure.
Self-certification mean the business is certifying itself, or we're doing our own program that's different?
We'll talk about that.
I do have that, yep. So those vendors that are self-certified will be, they'll be certifying themselves that they do meet the requirements. However, they will be verified by city staff post-award. So that's something that it's going to take a little bit of extra work for the staff and require investment in some software that will be helpful for us to do that tracking. But I really think it's a worthwhile option, at least to get started, as I mentioned, until the state has their program a little bit more refined for their process. And then, as mentioned on the sheet, there are several other certifications that we would recognize. And I didn't even look at my sheet, but you can see we've got the opportunity for some federal certifications, the small business enterprise, women-owned enterprise. So some of those would be something that would be acceptable in place of COVID.
So would there be a criteria list of some kind that we are establishing that they're self-certifying? I do, we meet this criteria.
Yeah.
Or there'd be criteria the city wouldn't.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Oops, and I went too far. Sorry about that. So as I mentioned, we talked to several other jurisdictions during our research, and the direction we're moving towards for our proposed pilot is based on the advice of other public agencies. And it's recommended that we start with some smaller efforts, specifically around materials, supplies, and other smaller service contracts, which can really make a large impact in our community, keeping that spend local. It's important to have our program be informed by the community and the suppliers. So we need to make sure that in our community engagement and vendor outreach, that the vendors know how to do business with the city. That's a big piece that can be a barrier. And then we want to make sure what their availability looks like. We don't want to inundate a newer small business with every order that the city possibly can throw their way if they're not able to meet that demand. So trying to make sure that we're strengthening their business at a rate that's achievable for them. And then all the while, we do need to keep in mind that we do have some city staff capacity. So trying to make sure that we're keeping in line with that. And then I think that's it, that page. Now I'd like to switch gears. Did you guys have any questions about that? Before
I'm curious, do you have anything to add or to this or thoughts or
Yeah, so.
have you been working together on this?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think all of it is of what we're presenting today is a collaborative effort between our teams. I really don't have much. else to add.
That was a great opportunity for me to.
It is worth mentioning that when we receive federal money, there are federal requirements to follow as far as supplier diversity as well. So the federal requirements require affirmative steps to be taken at every level of the contracting process to diversify the supplier chain, essentially. So in addition to the material supplies and services with local dollars, we'll be taking what's necessary to comply with the federal regulations from whatever federal department is doing.
Yeah, and some of the examples of some of the ideas that people gave us is, if we're having somebody cater some sort of event, working with a small women-owned business catering company. If we have coffee for some sort of meeting, working with the diverse suppliers in that realm. And just that's a good way to keep those dollars in our community.
Yes.
All right, so now I'd like to switch gears to community benefit. So as defined by Oregon Revised Statute, has requirements for the city to put in place what's called a community benefit contract. There are many hurdles for contractors to get past to qualify for those requirements. So, for example, they have to qualify as a training agent or provide an apprenticeship program that meets the federal and state standards for apprenticeship training. Employ apprenticeships to perform a specific percentage of the work, and that would be hours worked. Specific hours that workers in apprenticeship programs occupation. A specific percentage of work hours that workers in apprenticeship occupations perform on the community benefit project. And then finally, they must pay a living wage and then provide employer paid family health insurance. So our approach will be working towards that end goal, but will allow the construction community to get those programs in place before we make it a requirement. So, for example, another barrier there is it can take 1 to 2 years for a construction company to have that apprenticeship program in place. So that one's been pretty tricky. I've done some outreach to our construction companies that we've been working with. Some of them are close. Some of them are using apprenticeships in their programs, but are not close to having like a program already in place for themselves. So there's a number of different ways to approach this that don't have to start with that full community benefit contract, which I will cover on the next few slides. So examples of contract or RFP scoring provisions that provide a community benefit to the workforce are increasing employment opportunities for diverse workforce, ensuring a living wage is paid, which is actually covered by our BOLI requirements. So all of our projects already have that living wage requirement. And then requiring full family health benefits, and then apprenticeship programs to be able to teach the next generation of workers how to have these skills. So why is community benefit program important? Well, we want to maximize the impact of the city's investment for the community that we serve. allows us to establish further requirements based on the community needs and community's unique needs, and then creates opportunities to advance economic equality and opportunities for historically excluded populations. Supports training and the development of a skilled workforce and skilled and diverse workforce, and then supports local contractors in providing good jobs and benefits to workers in the community. It allows for the development of local standards to meet the specific needs of the community and prioritizes local economies around Oregon. And also supports responsible public construction, workforce standards, economic development, while accounting for the differing needs in Oregon communities. So our pilot approach, we want something in our city code that provides for the framework for us to move forward. This provides us with an entry point and operational things that we are doing to move towards achieving the council goals. So we have identified alternative construction delivery projects as a good place to start or to continue this work by incorporating community benefits currently in the scoring criteria, but we want to take this a step further than we did with the other projects to understand where our contractors are in the process of being able to meet the full requirements of a community benefit project, or pardon me, community benefit contract. So as I mentioned on the previous slide. So as part of this, we will be requiring contractors to provide tracking of apprenticeship positions as a percentage of overall workforce, work labor hours on the project. That'll help give us a baseline to see where they're at. And help it, and then as we understand what that baseline is, we can look to increase that requirement. We will continue to work on the program, the community, or continue to work on the program to have community and contractor outreach. Our goal is to grow and build and grow the program over time. So for example, in the future, we'd like to have a pre-qualification process for people to be able to participate in the solicitations that will set for community benefit contracts. So this is our proposed initial code language we're proposing for supplier diversity and community benefit. With this code change, we're looking to expand economic opportunities by providing opportunities for doing business with the city, to businesses owned by diverse suppliers, and to use our contracting power to support and encourage businesses that pay good wages and provide employer paid family health insurance and other community benefits. But we can achieve this by expanding the pool of businesses we do business with, and by considering other community benefits when appropriate and authorized by state law. This is a non-prescriptive approach to help us mold the projects as they come to fruition. So here's the milestones and next steps. So these are applicable to both programs. So far we've accomplished establishing a supplier diversity and community benefit team. The team is here with me today, and and it's been really interesting and a good learning experience. So far, let's see. We've had the opportunity to meet with other local and state government agencies to see how their programs have gone and gotten an idea of what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well. So trying to help fine-tune, understanding how their processes went to fine-tune our process and to guide us. Next, our proposed code change will be going before council in early May. And I'll be talking about that in the next portion of the presentation around the code changes that we're proposing. We'll continue to do research and meet with other agencies. And then during this quarter, we'll also be starting on the policy work. This is to consist of drafting the policy parameters, process and identifying technology needs to maintain a sustainable program. Quarter 3 will be our internal Our intern will work to educate our staff by providing outreach and training. And then we really need their buy-in to show them how to foster and help us grow the program. Q4 will be our external outreach to vendors, which will include how to do business with the city, developing vendor lists, setting benchmarks, and creating KPIs for performance measures, reporting audiences to support the process of goals and the impacts of the goals. Finally, in the next year, so these are calendar years that we're talking about right now. The next year, we will be monitoring and collecting feedback and how the program's going. And then we'll be looking at how we can expand it.
By the end of this year, it would be getting going.
The end of this year, we'd be getting going, and then the next year would be going and seeing how it goes. And that was a lot, but what questions does everyone have?
Make the
You
unit.
gotta run.
You have to run, but I think it sounds great. My biggest concern is thinking about the evolving legal environment that we're experiencing with
Yep.
respect to especially some of the rationale, and to the extent that we can, I think it's important that we try to anticipate that or recognize that some rationale might be more resistant or robust to legal challenge than others. So, you know, if we're promoting competition or if we are addressing wage disparities or something, that might be different than reflecting the demographics of our community or something like that.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I want to look more closely to see, you know, I mean, like there was the article a couple of weeks ago, the guy down in Klamath who was suing the State Department of Education because he was denied benefits of like a reimbursement program that was available to teachers of color. The rationale for that could make a big difference if you're recognizing the benefits of a teacher of color on the educational experience of students of color. That's different than saying we think that diversity is important, full stop, or something like that, or the value of inclusivity. That might not be sufficient.
Mhm.
So to the extent that we're able to, I think, try to keep an eye on the ones that will be more, I just don't want to see us get down a year or two from now and then have this shut down by a court case.
Yeah.
If we're able to take steps that say, that's not what this is about. This is about, you know, something else. So anyway, that's kind of long-winded, but
If you're adding criteria that are one of a number of criteria you're looking at for what you award or who you award to, so it's an inclusive rather than an exclusive type of program. I think we've seen those are more withstand challenge, less likely to be challenged, and also withstand challenge if you're sort of really focused on expanding the pool rather than having restrictive criteria. So I think that's the part of the approach we're taking.
Mhm.
that's good.
So one that says you couldn't apply
Unless, right?
unless you were.
Exactly.
But one that says you get extra points.
Perhaps,
additional
yeah.
points.
Mhm.
The scoring is made up of this
That makes
set of
sense.
criteria.
Yes.
Well, and then that might inform some comments from you then in my approach for some of the benefits around some of the increases that I'm looking for in the code changes for dollar threshold. So we'll definitely want some feedback there. And in your packet, you've got the proposed code changes, but that's not the right one. It's a big packet this week. You've got, you have that, the public contracts, proposed code changes. And the strikeout items are removing and anything underlined is having to make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to run.
Yep. Thank you.
The origins again of the community benefit program or.
What are the origins?
Yeah, I mean, is this
The union
required
here,
under state?
that's
Well, no, yeah, I
Their
know.
number one thing.
There's
That's-
politics of it, right? But is this required under state law or is it?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why we're taking a little bit of not a hardline approach of
Yeah.
you must have these things. We're looking towards moving that direction, but there's a lot of information out there about how some people have not done it the best way, including the state.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ODOT's
Yeah, ODOT's
being
being-
legally challenged right now with
Yeah.
their approach, so we want to be really careful about it, kind of to our.
I think this is good. It's like, it's again, it's sort of leading by example, but it's also dipping toes in the water, not whole bodies in the water, you know?
Exactly.
And so I think this is a really great way to do it.
Okay.
So for example, some of the ways we've dipped our toe in already is to add it to the scoring criteria.
Yeah,
When you're proposing on a project, one of the things you're scored on is what apprenticeship program do you have already? Are you paying above prevailing wage for certain categories? What's the makeup of your staff? What benefits do you offer, right? And that's put into their proposal and it's part of the scoring for our award of the contract. But it's not necessarily a requirement you must achieve in the contract.
And I really love the aspect of the apprenticeship programs. I mean, education is invaluable and that is a good way to get it.
I would say workforce development is one of the biggest
Yeah.
things that we hear right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
The next generation.
School boards.
Yeah.
levy or
Right.
bond or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, you're gonna be tired of me speaking pretty soon, but I've got the next topic also, if there's any other questions about that. Okay. Popped up nicely for me last time. Just looking. Have the presenters view them. Oh,
Has the
just
word
had-
minority's been run through the system, but like everyone's okay with using that word? I'm assuming Andres wouldn't let it go by.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because a lot of the state, it's antiquated, right? But it is a lot of it's the language that's used
It's actually-
by the state. So it tends to, when
Yeah.
you're aligned,
Okay.
has to align to it, it makes some sense, but I agree, it's not. It's a little.
I did notice that word is not used in this handout, so this, under the who part,
Mhm.
it says ethnic minority, but it doesn't say people of color or BIPOC or any of that sort of stuff, and I guess if this was gonna go out to the public, that's missing to me, I don't know what Andres would say about that, but.
Yeah, I would- but go ahead.
Well, just to make sure that we're being fully inclusive of who we're talking about.
Yeah,
And communicating that, right, if this is gonna be used publicly.
yeah, and
It
that,
shows up in a few other places.
yeah, that was originally a slide and
Right.
and going over that, we can definitely make a handout that's more robust to have those items or to have that listed. I did work really closely with Cassandra and Andreas's department to make sure that we're using
Trust their judgment.
Yeah.
appropriate
Right.
terminology, yeah. You haven't seen here? Nope, okay, cool. So for our next agenda item, we will be going over our proposed procurement or changes to the procurement changes to the Bend City Municipal Code. So you do have a handout in your packet that shows the code changes in the existing code. And I'm going to pause in several places to give you the opportunity to ask questions because it's kind of a lot of information. So as I mentioned in the previous presentation, we are adding code language around supplier diversity and community benefits to expand economic opportunity, promote economic vitality for Bend community, and then around driving policies and procedures. So since I went over that in pretty good detail in the last presentation, if there aren't any other questions about that, I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay. So there's a lot on this side, but you'll see in several places in the proposed updated code language recommendations that we bring the city in line with state limits for procurement thresholds. That became effective as of January 1st of this year. So first off, staff is recommending that we increase the direct appointment threshold, which is currently sitting at $10,000 and increasing that to $25,000. So direct appointment is where we are able to assign or purchase goods without having a competitive process, or direct appointing a contract where we wouldn't have to have a competitive process. The next item would be increasing the informal threshold for solicitations for anything that's greater than $10,000, currently to that $100,000. So at $100,000, that's when you would see it on the council agenda. Currently, we're looking to increase that in line with state guidelines to 25,000, between 25,000 and then up to 250,000. And then increasing that formal threshold for solicitations from that current 100,000 to greater than 250,000. Along with the formal threshold increase, we are also recommending an increase to 250,000 for when council needs to approve an agreement or cumulative amendments in that same amount. So that would authorize Eric to be able to approve those. The state formal threshold changes do only apply to goods and services agreements and professional services. So with the exception of engineering agreements. So these changes do not apply for the state law change to any public improvement contracts. Those will actually stay at a formal threshold of 100,000. Staff is recommending that the city manager be able to authorize the city for public improvement contracts or cumulative amendments up to that 250,000 without further approval by council. Okay, yeah.
So whereas now we have to bring every contract or amendment to a contract over 100,000 to council, that would raise that to 250.
We would still have to do a formal process, which would be putting it out to any interested parties to be able to propose on those contracts. So that's maybe that difference, but it wouldn't necessarily need to go before you to approve that. All right. Next, we're recommending increase to city manager's authority for a direct appointment for personal services agreements. Currently, that's sitting at 30,000, and we're looking to increase that to 50. Then finally, we're recommending increasing the authority for directors to be able to sign. Currently, they can sign for contracts up to 25,000. We're looking to increase that to 50. Any questions on? Okay.
And these thresholds are all generally aligned with either some kind of best practice or state law.
So the procurement method is aligned with, those thresholds are aligned with the new changes to state law that Heather mentioned. So there's two questions. There's what method do you have to use? And that's aligned with state law. And then there's who has the authority to sign the contract. And that's locally determined. And so we're sort of aligning those.
All right, so what are the benefits of these increases? So it would allow us to save some staff time for the procurement team to be able to concentrate on some of those higher priority strategic purchases. It will also increase efficiencies by speeding up the process for some of those smaller dollar contracts to have a larger volume of those flow through under that threshold. And then it'll increase increased direct appointment threshold may be used, for example, for council goal setting facilitators, other trainings and small contracts. Formal solicitations are a pretty long and involved process. So allowing increasing that threshold could allow us to have solicitations where we get 3 quotes, and that could speed up that process. These increases, and I would love your input here specifically, may help with some of our supplier diversity efforts in allowing us to increase that direct appointment limit, can allow us to provide businesses opportunities to the local diverse suppliers without having to obtain quotes for the direct appointment. As a reminder, the formal solicitations require us to open our solicitations out to anybody who wants to propose on the projects or contracts. And so if we have that threshold of 25 to under 250, which is our informal threshold, we are allowed to choose the vendors that we provide those opportunities to. So that kind of that might be something that I don't know if it sends the message that we're looking for based on some of the comments in the previous presentation. But the nice thing about that is we're also able to direct some of those opportunities to people that have been previously vetted as contractors that have been good to work with, and or vendors that qualify as diverse suppliers. Any questions there? Okay. All right, so we have some new code recommendations. So something around our competitive procurement exemptions. City may contribute funding to a privately constructed public improvement project without subjecting the project to a competitive solicitation process. So there's many conditions that we would need to meet to be allowed or to have that allowed to be exempt. So the city's contribution to the project cannot exceed 25% of the total project cost. The city will have to comply with all applicable laws regarding the reporting of prevailing wages. So those BOLI wages and making sure that they're paying that living wage.
What would be like an example of that?
So an example of a project like that is if somebody is maybe putting in a development and there may be sidewalk that is city owned, we could jump in and provide the
Yeah, so if someone is doing a development and they have to put in the sidewalk in front of their parcel, and then there's 75 more feet to get to the intersection, they're not required to do that 75 feet. But we could pay money to add that 75 feet to their contract. Rather than having a separate contract or our staff kind of getting to it when they can. So it's a way to get more complete improvements. If they're repaving a section, we can add on to what they're doing to get more complete.
It's a tool we'd really like to have because there have been opportunities. Oh, we split the gap, but we've never been figure out a way to exchange those funds.
And it can trigger prevailing wage for the whole project if certain limits are reached. So we do want to be careful with the way we use it, that we don't unintentionally add additional expense to private development, but it's a tool to add to the toolbox to get some of that more infill
We
infrastructure.
pay for it, they do the work.
There's been some instances where developers, they've actually come to us, say they're willing to do it, but we've never found, we didn't have the right mechanism to do it.
Yeah, we've sort of had to piecemeal it together how and when we can do it. And so this just is adding a little bit more clarity that we can do that.
So one of the other things around that is that this cannot provide any monetary benefit to the owner of the project. This would be clearly for the benefit of the community.
So that's this section D of this section of code, right? That's code that was added. The pecuniary benefit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what? Pecuniary
It's one of those
words.
lawyer words
Yeah.
everybody else uses.
Yeah.
You gotta maybe use it, Sam. Yeah. Yeah, so it's,
Profit or?
yeah, so it can't be to the financial benefit of the developer. That's what that means.
And so in the example that you gave, it's not benefiting them because it's not sort of reducing their costs and because they're only required to do this part, we're adding to.
Right, so we'd be paying just for the part of the infrastructure that we need and we want them to build without sort of a profit added on top of that to them.
Yep. And then finally around that, the general contractor must maintain adequate workers' compensation and liability insurance to protect and provide indemnification to the city for all claims for payments for like injury, project damage, anything arising out of the construction project.
And so can I just ask about in paragraph 7, in that same section of the code that says any other contract where the public interest would be promoted by exempting the contract. So that's at the discretion of who's making that call.
So that type of exemption is like those findings we were talking about earlier for procurement other than design, bid, build. That's actually you grant an exemption from competitive bidding That's an example. We have to follow the rules set by the
Or
state
for
to go to
PDB.
PDB or CMGC and come to council to seek that exemption. That's what that means.
So the next new proposed code recommendation is exemption from a competitive process required for utility work on utilities provided. Utilities provided when it's the utility's own facilities. So this would allow direct appointment for contracts to hire for BNSF, power company, Avion, Rhodes Water, or any other utility to provide service on their own infrastructure. So for example, streetlights, electricity. So when we're paying someone to do work on their old facilities, we would need to go through that competitive process.
Right now, we bring those to council, or we have to get a sole source exemption that says, yes, we looked and Pacific Power is the only one authorized to provide power. So we're going to contract with Pacific Power. This it lets us avoid that sole source process and just sets it out in the code.
Few less memos to write, so.
Staff appreciate not having to write those memos.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's figure out what we're talking about.
I know, and because there is no other option. Okay, so then the final recommendation is around the public art paid for by the city. So Joe mentioned a little bit of information in her presentation about the public art through the mandate of the 1% of the direct construction funds of new or remodeled buildings with construction budgets over 100,000. So this allows for direct contract purchase of public art as long as the public process was used to select. So for example, Art in Public Places facilitates the selection via a call for art. And then the selection is made by public input. Anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so similar with the utilities right now, we bring a sole source to council. It says this artist is the only source for this art. And the reason is we went through a public process. It's just not a procurement public process. So we have to go through a sole source to contract directly with that artist. This basically puts that into the code so that we don't have to write those sole source memos, but we'll follow the same process we're using today, which is we'll contract with artists. Art in Public Places has selected through their process that we contract with them to run. Simplifying, hopefully.
Yep.
Is the goal.
So continue with new recommended code updates. So regarding the city manager's authority to obligate the city manager may enter into a public contract exceeding 250,000 without specific council approval for replacement of vehicles or equipment if they are purchased off of a state cooperative, and if the expenditure has already or previously been included in the adopted budget. So that would mean some of those big factors that are in the budget that we wouldn't necessarily need to bring before council to get approval to pay for those.
The code
Or make
says
that purchase.
fuel also, right? Is that okay? Do you mean for that to be in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Right?
Doesn't say fuel up there.
Fuel is,
Is that like
Yeah.
yes,
propane and stuff like that?
Yep.
And gasoline.
and gas for
Yeah.
the city vehicles. Yep.
So those are under this cooperative.
And then the next new code recommendation is under the disposition of surplus property. So we would like the ability to transfer retired police dogs or canines to the handler or another qualified individual without a competitive process. This is standard after years of
a competitive process.
We have exempted so typically to get rid of any surplus city property, you have to have a competitive process. You're prohibited from giving surplus city property to city employees.
Mhm.
That's not the recommended process for dogs. So we've had to have a workaround where the city manager specifically exempts a dog to be allowed to give the dog to. So. Yeah, it's going to. It says you can leave it out in the public for anybody to come get it, and then a city employee can come get it. Which is
Wow.
ridiculous when you're talking about a trained canine.
Yeah, that has a-
handler, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the bond between handler and
Yeah.
canine is strong. And so, yeah, the standard practice is for cities to be able to have that, the canine go to the care of the, or retired canine to go to the care of a handler. If the handler is unable to take the dog, we need to make sure that we have a qualified individual be identified to be able to take that. So a lot of times that ends up being trainers of police dogs, because they're not family pets.
No.
Maybe you should say police dogs up there, because it,
Oh.
you could read it as police officers, retired police.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are you guys doing there with the police?
Thank you. Sorry about that. A little comic relief in a very. All right, so in addition to the newly proposed code regarding canine, staff is recommending increase to the thresholds for processes around when we declare surplus property. So that would include an increase from $5,000 to $10,000, which aligns for the process of when we are able to authorize surplus at $10,000 to align with the current fixed assets threshold. And then we would like to increase the city manager's authority to be able to approve declaration of surplus under 100,000. That would be changed from 25 right now. So at this moment, if we have anything that's valued at over 25,000, it has to be approved by council. So we would be looking to move that up to 100,000. And then we'd like to increase the threshold where, oh, I think I just said that. Yeah. So examples of the personal property include things like vehicles or that are usually past their serviceable condition. So that was what we would be looking to surplus. And that was pretty quick, but that's now questions. We did it in the hour and a half. This was a long meeting, so I appreciate everyone taking the time to participate. Elizabeth, anything to add? Okay, we did it all.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff on timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot of kind of just seeing how things have worked. It's like, that might be something we should look at making easier for ourselves. So
Help support.
To like, yes, like vote against it or something.
Why me?
I think anyone should have the right to own stone.
Somebody else can vote against it.
We
Can I need this? Are we adjourned?
We're done.
meeting adjourned. Thank you.